All right, we're back here, week 2 of our interview with Austin Denton. Austin, talk about the childhood growing up. Talk about, in particular, your form of childhood cancer and the difficulties.
So early on in my childhood, at first I was a normal baby. I was just getting into everything that I could, you know how babies are, and just being able to, just walking around my house and just living a normal childhood life. And then one day I was outside just playing with our friends that were neighbors with us in the one of the first neighborhoods that we were living in, and my parents started to notice that I was having a little trouble keeping up with them. So if they were running up one side of the street, I couldn't really catch up with them, and they noticed that I was noticeably dragging my left foot. And so they were thinking, oh, maybe he hurt his leg somehow. Maybe he hit a rock, or maybe he tripped or something. So they took me to the local pediatrician, and they were just thinking at that point, oh, maybe he just hurt his leg. Maybe he needs a cast or something like that. But after the pediatrician did some tests, they ordered an MRI, thinking that maybe there was a broken bone or something else was there. And so they did that MRI test, and right after that, the four words that no parent ever wants to hear about their child were told to my parents, and that was, your child has cancer. And so they diagnosed me with a tumor in my spinal cord. I can never pronounce the medical term for it. It's super complicated, but either way, it was a very rare form of a tumor that was inside my spinal cord. And so I was diagnosed right at 2 years old. I did a year of treatment here at the UNM hospital. I did a year of chemotherapy here, and we were lucky enough to be treated by a doctor who had actually just come from St. Jude to the UNM hospital. And when he realized the kind of case that I was having to go through, and the kind of cancer that I had and the form that it was in, he said that I think you should go to St. Jude. And we were lucky enough for him to be coming from St. Jude and knowing what St. Jude could do at their hospital. And so he sent us to St. Jude. I was referred over there and started several surgeries and radiation treatments starting at 3 years old. And I was in remission at first. The tumor had come back when I was about 7 years old in 2nd grade, and had to go through a little bit more treatment, but they were able to cure it, and I will be 10 years cancer-free here very soon.
That's great to hear. So let me ask you, when the diagnosis was first made, and obviously in hindsight you've done some amazing things in your life, but how long did that why me pain stay with you? And obviously your mom's sitting a couple of feet from us. How long did your parents have that why our son, that initial pain? Talk about that.
I mean, with my family, we always try and take a positive outlook on every single day. And even though we were going through some difficult times with what I was having to go through, again, I was just 2 years old at the time, so I don't remember the majority of the time. I didn't know what cancer meant at that time. And I was just trying to live a normal childhood life, but I was always having to be held back by, no, we got to go to this doctor now, or we got to go see this clinician now, or we've got to go see this person and see what we can do to help you. And so I think my parents didn't really want to take that why me approach. They were always saying, okay, now we know that he has this, what can we do to fix it? And so they always took that positive outlook every single day, and they wanted to do whatever they could in their power, and whatever St. Jude could do in their power, and whatever my family could do in their power, just to gather around me and say, we're gonna fix this.
Do you think this had you naturally be closer to your parents than most kids at your age at that time?
I would think so. It's just because of the multiple times that we had to be together, and just overall being together through this difficult time. I felt like I've grown a closer relationship with my parents, and we can always talk about anything and just have a normal conversation every single day, and not say, okay, Mom, I'm going to hang out with a friend or something. I'm always just making sure I let them know what I'm doing, and always just just making sure that just being able to communicate with them and all that stuff. So our relationship is really close.
So when did that love of sport, when was that born?
So I think after my first initial treatments, after I was able to go back home and live a normal life and start kindergarten, my parents at the time were the cheerleading coaches at UNM. And so they were kind of having to do both at the same time, you know, making sure their kid was well and also doing their job with whatever they could at the time. And so with cheerleading, I was exposed to a lot of sports at the time because cheerleaders are always going to basketball games, or cheerleaders are always going to football games, or maybe even a soccer game every now and then. But I was just exposed to these sports at an early age. And at first, at a younger age, you're not always able to comprehend what's happening. But for some reason, when I was younger, I just fell in love right away. And then once I started getting older and knowing what stats were with sports and how that correlated with the game, and learning the rules of basketball and the rules of football and all these different sports, I think that's when I really said, okay, this is what I want to do. And so that just kind of where it started.
And you're quite the writer at La Cueva as well. So do you kind of have that same passion for journalism? Is it stronger on the sports side, or is it really just a perfect marriage of both?
It's definitely stronger on the sports side. I mean, I feel like that there's two paths that I could go when it comes to my next career choice. It could be sports journalism, or it could even be sports broadcasting. And that's one of those things that I'm really going to have to pick and choose once I get into college and say, okay, what do I really want to do? And sometimes you can even do both. I mean, I know that there are some sports personalities that are both writers and broadcasters, and they can do both. So if that opportunity comes up, I'll definitely take it and do both at the same time, because I really love both equally. And again, it all ties with sports, and that's what brings up this passion with me, is being able to do both and get the opportunities that I have and that I'm able to do. So.
Now, for our audience that doesn't know, Austin goes to La Cueva High School here locally, and you kind of turned into Mr. La Cueva, right? And how did that? Talk about a little bit how that happened. Talk about how the coaches, Coach Back especially, but all of them, I'm sure, really welcomed you with open arms to their programs, and how you've turned that into a real passion. Well,
I think some of the coaches had already known that I was getting involved with sports at my middle school and doing whatever I could just to be involved with middle school sports, as well as on football side, getting involved with Yaffle. I was a manager for a La Cueva Yaffle team for 2 years. I was a manager for our middle school basketball teams all 3 years. And so that's when the love for stats and sports really got going, because they asked me to keep their stats for football and for basketball. And so once I started getting a feel for it and started learning these programs that I could use to keep the stats, or even in a written book, like for baseball or something, even for basketball as well. Just being able to learn those things early on and carry that over to high school is what really led Coach Back and Coach Castillo and all the members of La Cueva to say, hey, we want you to come and be a part of our team.
So when did you link up with the local radio station and Joe Neal?
So it's kind of an interesting story. I was heading into my freshman year at La Cueva, and one day my mom just gets a random call, and she thought maybe it was just a business call, so she didn't answer it at first. And then she was like, oh, they left a voicemail, let's see what it is. And the message was Joe Neal from 101.7. And this kind of just blindsided me, because I had no idea that this was going to happen. And what I figured out, how this even came about, was that Brian O'Neill, who is Joe's brother and the color commentator for the basketball broadcast, had seen me doing work with an AYBL team. And he had known previously of the announcing that I did at some basketball games or at some competitions, and he saw me keeping the stats for this AYBL team that I was working with my 7th grade year, and he said, I think this kid would be perfect for the radio station. He goes and lets Joe know, and Joe's like, I fully agree. So he gives me a call, and the rest is history. I joined the high school football crew, and heading into my 4th year with the high school football crew next year, and 3rd year with high school basketball. So I'm very excited for it.
All right, so now take us to the Metro Championship. There you are. You know, usually for our viewers that don't know, usually you do halftime and you do stats. So there you are. For those of us that were there, Scott Galletti is sick as a dog that week, right? He barely has a voice. So he's there, Brian's there, you're there, the broadcast is ready to begin. And if I remember correctly, because I was doing the same game on TV, but as Brian told the story to me later that night, so Scott starts to do the game and his voice just totally gives out, and he has to point right at you.
And
Take it from there.
Yeah, and this was the 2nd day of the Metro Championships. The first day, I was just kind of there to help him out. He still had some voice, but it wasn't completely there, so I was just there to kind of support what he was trying to say if his voice gave out at a certain point. And so, and the 2nd day, I thought he thought everything was going to be fine. Brian thought everything was going to be good. I thought it was going to be fine too. And then the moment he opened his mouth on the 2nd day of that Metro tournament, there was nothing there. And so he was like, he looked at me, and I knew in that moment, I was like, okay, this is on me now. I got to take it from here. So right after that, I just took over the play-by-play, and Brian and I were just flowing like a normal broadcast, like nothing had happened. And Scott was doing everything he could to try and get his voice back up, but I think it was just better for him to let him rest it, and he decided that it was better for him to let him rest it too. So right after that, we just said, all right, we'll take it from here. And I did the broadcast with Brian for the boys championship, and then with Coach Sanchez, Yvonne Sanchez, for the girls championship. So it was a lot of fun, but you know, I felt bad for Scott in that moment just because I knew how much he wanted to do it, but he just couldn't. So
in hindsight, was that maybe the best thing that could have happened to you because you didn't have a chance to get nervous and prepare? It just kind of happened. Sometimes I think the bigger the broadcast, the more you think about it the couple of days before. You get some butterflies before you put the headset on, right? But you weren't expecting to call that game. Was that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, I think in terms of like nerves and like preparation, like I had already known who the teams were and their background and everything. I had that fresh in my mind, because you also have to have that for the halftime show. If you don't really know their background, then you don't really have content for a halftime show. So I already had that thought in the back of my mind, but to get nervous, I couldn't. I was being thrown right in there and say, all right, kid, you're up.
And obviously you did fine. I mean, you did great. You always do. You do a lot of stuff here at Proview Networks for us. What's your favorite sport to broadcast?
Well, I would say it's probably basketball here for Proview, and I've been able to do AYBL broadcasts and a couple of high school basketball. I did my first high school basketball game this year when Cibola and Volcano Vista were playing, and on the girls' side. And I love the game of basketball. I mean, I've grown around basketball more than I have any other sport, so I have more knowledge of the game. I am able to have more fun with it. It's just fun to be able to also do the AYBL broadcast, because some of them could be my younger sister's classmates, and they could go up to my sister and be like, hey, your brother announced our game last night, or something like that. And that's what's even more fun for me, because knowing that I was able to make an impact on their lives just by broadcasting their game is a lot of fun.
So what's been the highlight? What's been let's leave the NFL stuff. Obviously, that's going to be the highlight. But locally here, what's been your broadcast highlight?
I think it was probably the first broadcast that I got to do with Proview. And this was kind of one of those things where I was also thrown into it as well. Scott had asked me to help him keep stats for two Yaffle Super Bowl games that we were doing back in 2015 or 2014, one or the other. And it's and this is me when I was a high-pitched voiced freshman, and I was just keeping stats for him, and I had the headset on just to kind of listen to what he did, because my dad had said, if you listen to Scott or these other broadcasters, you get a better idea of what you can do to make your own unique style when it comes to broadcasting. And so Scott just kind of did this. We were coming back in from a commercial, and he's like, all right, we're back here live from the stadium. It's 14-7. Austin, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, wait, what? What? I'm supposed to talk now? I thought it was just keeping stats, you know? But right as he threw me in there, I was like, all right, I guess I'll say something. And we were just talking about the flow of the game and this play and that play. And I got thrown right in there, and I was like, all right, maybe if I can make an impression, I can work for these guys.
Do you have a favorite national broadcaster?
Favorite national broadcaster? I would say it would probably be Joe Buck or Rich Eisen. I just because I've been able to personally interact with them too.
Mine's Adam Deal.
I'll give him that too.
Yeah. All right.
So, but I mean, just being able to personally interact with Rich and Joe at the Super Bowl 51 at the Legends for Charity gala where Rich got the Pat Summerall Award. Just being able to directly, personally interact with them and just be able to talk with them both and get to know them and their styles and giving me tips on what I can do to further my career. I mean, that's something that I can't ever take back. So it was super humbling that they were able to share what they could with me, and I was able to interview them too, and Mike Tirico on stage at that Legends for Charity dinner. And so just being able to be around all three of them was an amazing thing.
All right, well, we're going to end Local Focus like we always do with some rapid fire, just some topical stuff. So these will be easy questions for you. I'll ask you the same thing I asked Jordan Bird. It's NBA playoff time right now. Are you an MJ guy or are you a LeBron guy?
I really don't know, but I'd like to stick with the classics. I'm probably going to be an MJ guy. I know LeBron has been proving a lot recently, and his playoff performance has been great. But as long as he can win more championships and he can continue to just keep on working, if he plays for a few more years and really buffs out his stats more, then he could probably overtake LeBron, or I'm sorry, overtake MJ. But right now, I'm still sticking with Jordan.
Who do you think is going to win the finals?
I really hope that it's going to be Rockets and Celtics in the finals. I mean, Cavs and Warriors, it's always a great matchup between the two, but I think NBA fans at this rate want some more variety. So if we see Rockets Celtics, that would be also, I think, a really historic finals as well. That one could also go 7 games. But if I had to choose, I think the Rockets could take it. I really think the Rockets could win it.
All right, you said basketball was your sport. If you need to win one game, all things equal, what coach do you want on that sideline to win your game?
I would probably say Gregg Popovich from the Spurs, because he has so much knowledge of the game, and to see the things that he's been able to do with the Spurs in his entire career, and what he's been able to do for the game of basketball in general is really a super cool thing, because he brings a lot of knowledge. He knows the game of basketball thick and thin. He really interacts with his players and gets them better for their career, and if they stick with the Spurs, and he gets veteran talent. I mean, he has Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, who's retiring now, but you've also got Kawhi Leonard that he can look forward to getting back next year, so the Spurs could be back out for revenge. Who knows?
Did you hear Laurel or Yanni?
Oh, geez, I heard Yanni.
All right.
I heard Yanni. I'm sorry, people. I heard Yanni.
Okay, last one. You cover a lot of high school sports. Best high school athlete you've seen here in New Mexico at your time? So
far, it's been Jordan Bird, and I mean, Jordan has been very impressive when it comes to football, and then out there on track and field. His speed is super quick, and that speed is really going to help him in the future when he gets to San Diego State for football. I'm really excited to see what his future holds, and hopefully he can make New Mexico proud.
Austin, thanks so much for coming in, my friend.
Thank you, Sebastian, for having me.
Anyone else that thinks they have something interesting to be on Local Focus, tweet at the show or at Proview TV. We'd love to hear about it, and we'd love to spotlight it here. Thanks for joining us this week.